6 in our book, excuse me. Lesson 6 in our book, and the title of it is A Relieving Grace. A Relieving Grace. And of course, it's the story of the widow and her son, who were down to the last handful of meal or of corn, or I'm trying to think what it was, what they call it in the story, or in the account. Slip of 9, what do they call it? Meal. Yeah, last little bit of meal, and then the last little bit of oil, and their craft. What do they call that?
Cruise.
I'm sorry, what?
Cruise.
CRUS.
Okay, their cruise. Yeah. So it's not a curse. Cruise. There you go. Curse. Yeah. But anyway, so we sat there and we're talking about the story. We know that how the woman she listened to the request of Elijah. She didn't tell him to get lost, or she didn't tell him to go fetch your own what? She didn't tell him to go fetch your own, go get your own cricket or lizard, or go cook your own meal. But she was submissive, and she was willing to serve and give. We know, of course, that she had some burdens, right? She had a burden of loneliness. She had a burden of limited resources for sure, and she had a burden of love. But she had belief, and she had faith to obey, and she had grace to serve and to help Elijah and his needs of food. We left off. We were discussing the blessings of the woman, the blessings of the widow. We started out there last week, so that's kind of what we touched on, and we left off. So we're going to look at number 3, the blessings of the widow. 1 Kings 17:6. Brother Ken, if you please read that. Hey, had all my answers right here. I should have skipped yours again. What?
1716?
Yeah, it was 17:16, please.
The barrel of cruse, or the barrel,
Yeah.
neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah.
All right, so we think about it, and we, of course, in the account, we know that, man, when Elijah showed up on the scene, there was just a little bit of meal left in the barrel, and they were definitely had a need, and she was gathering up a couple sticks to make make a spark. I don't know, not much fire, but a couple sticks to make a fire to cook a little cake or whatever she was going to make of it and eat it. But we think about the blessings of the widow when Elijah showed up, and we think about the grace and the faith they had. It met all their needs. It met the needs of all 3 of them. Let's take a look here. When a person begins to grow in grace and exercise faith, they can be prepared for God to bless them and meet their needs. We have to first obey, and we know that the widow woman, she obeyed, and she was able to make a meal for Elijah. She provided for Elijah, and she had received a blessing. The widow trusted God and to keep His promise, and He provided miraculously. And we talked about how who does God ultimately use? Does God look for and desire to use the prideful and those that are arrogant? Or who does He look to use? Who does he want to desire to use? Look at Proverbs 3:34. Elmer.
Yes, sir. Proverbs 3:30 says, "Surely he scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly."
So we think of this lowly widow woman here, and she was in need. She desired to serve and have faith and trust, and she was blessed. Of course, when we think about those that don't have a lot, the world thinks of them as being not important. The world can think of them as being not useful in any way. But we know that if one is following the Lord in faith and in humility, God can use them to do amazing things, miraculous things. And God can bless them beyond that which most people with wealth would be able to experience. She had God gave her grace to replenish her physical needs. We think about the physical needs. What physical needs did the woman have? Well, of course, her and her son were down to the last tiny bit of meal and oil, and the portion was only sufficient for a final meal. We think about when Elijah showed up, but it not only did it feed 2, but it fed 3 people for many days. Don't know exactly what the span of time was that it was, but it met the needs for many days. God's grace is always sufficient. It is greater than any other of our needs, no matter what they might be. But yet, children of God sometimes live without experiencing joy because they don't have faith. They don't have faith and rest in the grace to meet their needs. So let's take a look at Matthew 9:28. When we think about grace, we think about faith, we think about believing, we're going to look at Matthew 9:28.
And when he was come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus saith unto them, Believe ye that I am able to do this? They said unto him, Yea, Lord. Can we read the next one too?
29 to you, please.
Then touched he their eyes, saying, According to your faith be it unto you.
All right. So we have here, we'll pose a few questions. Is there anyone that God cannot help? Is there any situation, is there any problem bigger than what God can only help? Now, it has to be in His will, of course, but there's nothing that God, with looking to God, leaning on God, cannot overcome. Do we have needs or challenges that He cannot supply for? And we can know that the answer is, of course not. And it's not the problem in His ability to provide, but most likely the problem can be our reluctance or our inability to believe or have faith. And the faith that it requires to get the grace to supply our needs. So we have the thought here of grace to relieve her fear. We're looking at the blessings of this widowed woman, and we think of the blessing of her physical needs, and the provision of the meal that did not run out, and the oil that did not run out, but provided substance for them to eat. We think about the grace that relieved her fear. Excuse me. So we think about grace to relieve her fear. Well, there's got to be a song out there we can think of that talks about grace, right? I don't know. Is there one? Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow, that's someone actually said that. That was good. But we have here the thought that in that song, and we think of that hymn. It has the words and the thoughts that say, "'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved." We think about grace. We think about how it can relieve our fears, how it can comfort us. But yet, fear remains a constant reality today. We think about the fear that people. It's pandemic, man. It's like, whoa, you're looking at anybody, someone coughs, and it's like, I mean, it just you got this. Everything's all ramped up, but we need to be looking to the Lord, trusting the Lord, having our faith and trust in Him, in order to provide for us and take care of us. Now we need to do our part, but we just gotta be able to have faith and look to Him. Now, what in our world we have today? We think about our world today. There's people have problems with depression, different problems. And what do a lot of what is something that's prescribed for depression? Pardon me?
Drugs.
No, drugs. They probably got all kinds of stuff, And I mean, they may help some people, but a person needs to look to the Lord, look for comfort from the Lord, have something they can have a hope in, a trust in, have a faith in. Besides some medical. Again, it's not that we don't need medicines. The Lord's blessed man with the ability to understand, drugs and the needs of some of those things. But ultimately, we need to be looking to the Lord, trusting the Lord, putting our faith and trust in Him. the Bible tells us that a spirit of fear does not come from God. Let's take a look and see what 2 Timothy 1:7. What does 2 Timothy 1:7 say? I don't even know who's up.
What was that?
What was it?
2 Timothy 1:7. We're not supposed to live, God doesn't give us the spirit of fear. What does God give us? What's the spirit that God gives us?
For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind.
All right. So we see here that this widow woman, she had grace. We see the grace in her life. And we think about what happens a lot of times when you have let's say something good happens. Let's say something, some big blessing happens and something real big, something special happens in your life. What's typically going to follow shortly after that?
A valley.
Huh?
A valley of some kind.
Some kind of valley, you got the highs, you got the lows, but a lot of times when you have a blessing and you get a blessing of some kind or something happens and you're up on top of your world, something comes and chops you at the knees, right? And something can happen. So, and we think about how true that is in life. And we know that this woman, she had a need of food, and after this miraculous provision that her family had need of food, and what happened to the one thing that she loved, had left in this world to love? What happened to her son? He got sick. He died. And we think about that must have been devastating for her, obviously. In 1 in your book, we have B as relieving, or grace relieved her fear, and then we have 1 as a tragic loss. We think of a tragic loss. If you look into our text at 1 Kings 17, 17 and 18, if we can read those, I guess Seth will come back up to you.
It says, and it came to pass after these things that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick. And his sickness was so sore that there was no breath left in him. And she said unto Elijah, What have I to do with thee, O thou man of God? Art thou come unto me to call my sin to remembrance and to slay my son?
All right, so we think about how this woman, she was going through a time of drought. She lost her husband, and now, she was at this place where they had food, but now her son got sick and her son died. So the only comfort that she had after the passing of her husband was her son. And her son, of course, was probably her hope for the future, her company for the future, comfort for the future. And she was dedicated to him and dedicated her life to taking care of him, and now suddenly he was gone. So the hope and the faith that she had, what do you suppose happened to her? She had faith and hope, and she had the meal, and she had the oil, and then everything got kind of taken away, pulled away. The rug got pulled out from underneath her, you might say, right? And we think about the moment of anguish and despair that she was in. What did she do? What is our reaction when something bad happens? What is our tendency to do?
Get angry.
Well, we get angry. We have doubt, don't we? Doubt in God. Blame other people. Never do anything like that. Something happens, and and maybe it was someone else's fault. But a lot of times, maybe something. I don't know. But you tend to start blaming, pointing fingers at people, But we think about who did she blame for her son's death?
Herself.
She blamed herself. Because of what?
Of her sin.
Because of her sin. But she also blamed Elijah, kind of judging her, right? Or kind of coming to judge her. But she blamed Elijah and she blamed herself. But you think about it, had Elijah not showed up, what would have happened long before? They would probably starved to death. They wouldn't have probably lived, right? They would have died long before. But many people respond to trouble and they respond to it irrationally, right? Sometimes, you gotta step back and think about it. And that's why it's real good to, when something happens, to be going to God in prayer. Don't jump the gun. Don't skip the pray thing and think about thing and lead me, guide me, Lord thing. I shouldn't say thing, but the avenue of looking to the Lord, the avenue of praying to the Lord, asking for guidance, asking for wisdom, for knowledge. But she was having some trouble there. She was acting irrationally. She blamed God, or supposing that God was judging her sin or their sin. And in her grief, she responded both ways: the blaming others and blaming herself and blaming the sin. But of course, we know that while it's true that God chastens His children, not all trouble and not all chastening is a punishment because of sin. We know that. We know the account of Job. He did nothing wrong. That's just the course of our life that God has for us. And whatever that might be, is for us to grow in knowledge of Him, grow in trust in Him, and faith in Him, and to grow in the ability to rest upon Him. And it's a fact, obviously, that we live in a fallen world, and trouble is just a natural part of our life. Trouble is just something that we know we are going to encounter. But we had a tragic loss, and then we had a tender prayer. Let's look at, we continue in our reading in our text. We read 17 through 18. Let's take a look now at 1 Kings 17, 19 through 21.
And he said unto her, Give me thy son. And he took him out of her bosom, and carried him up into a loft where he abode, and laid him upon his own bed. And he cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord, my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourned by slaying her son? And he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and cried unto the Lord, and said, O Lord, my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again.
All right, so we see here, and we had what a tragic loss to have a son pass away, your only son, and your husband's gone. But we see here Elijah, a tender prayer. What do you think of when you think of something that's tender? What do you think of?
Like gentle or sincere.
Gentle, sincere, considerate, loving. We think about, we see here Elijah. Elijah's prayer for the boy. We think, what is he, when he prays, what is he demonstrating here? What's Elijah demonstrating here? He's demonstrating a faith here, isn't he? We know that he's praying here to the Lord. We see here, he cried to the Lord, hast thou also brought evil upon the, let me see here, I've got to find my right spot. 20. Yes. He cried to the Lord and said, O Lord, my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the woman with whom I sojourned by slaying her son? And he stretched himself upon him 3 times. And he prayed that, let this child's soul come unto him again. He prayed. He was grieving. He was tenderly making a request, and he had faith that God was able to do this.
He didn't give up either.
He didn't give up. No, good point. He did not give up. Sometimes we might pray. Sometimes we might, people might give up, pray one time and be done. We make these requests to the Lord. But there's no record of the scriptures of a resurrection prior to this story, and he did not have previous examples to bolster or believe that God would do this, but he had faith and he believed that God was able to do this thing. So Elijah made his request, and we know the Lord answered. we have the thought here, I have a bunch of stuff written down now. Let's think about this a minute. So we can see here the faith that Elijah had, and you see and that's a good thing to have faith and trust and believe and that God can do it, but if I sit here and pray for a nice retro Camaro, or a nice retro Camaro, and I believe God's going to give it to me, does that mean I'm going to get a nice retro Camaro? Huh?
Nope.
No. And why not? I mean, it'd be foolish to sit there and think anything I pray for, anything I have faith and believe, I know He can do it. I know He can do that. But there's another verse that we should take with it, go along with it. What verse might that be? Any thoughts?
Matthew 21:22.
Go ahead and read it. I don't have that one written down. What was Matthew 21:22 say? Go ahead and read it.
It says, in all things whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believe it, you shall receive.
All right. So, but if I pray and believe that I'm going to get a retro Camaro, does that mean I'm going to get one?
Maybe that's what.
It's probably not just gonna appear in the parking lot right now. Maybe
Right.
it'll change your mind.
Aha! Barb just kind of nailed it. All right. So anybody know what verse that is that talks about being God's will? How ought we to pray? How are we to pray? God, I have faith and believe that you're going to give me a retro Camaro. We ought to be careful, and we ought to pray. And Barb made the comment about being God's will. Let's look at 1 John 5:14 through 15. 1 John. Now I believe that if I pray, I believe I can possibly have a retro Camaro, but at the same token, it needs to be in God's will. So, Barb, you want to read that for us, please?
And if this is the confidence that we have in Him, that if we ask anything according to His will, He heareth us.
All right. So, ultimately, we need to be praying, and we need to be praying that we're in God's will. We need to be praying that not just we can make requests, but we need to be asking in a right manner. Any thoughts on that?
The fact that he prayed 3 times to represents God's perfect
Trinity, yeah, that's a great point there too. But ultimately, the raising of the widow's son was in God's will. It was God's desire to grant that, and therefore we have the thought 3 here as the triumphant resurrection. Think of we can pray in faith, and we can have confidence that God will answer. We know that if we pray and we are now when it comes to prayer, though, I mean, can we be living a sin-filled life and pray to the Lord and respect everything to be granted? I mean, we ought to be going to the Lord. We ought to be confessing our sins. We ought to be trying to ask the Lord to lead us and guide us, and ask for forgiveness of areas where we're a failure, and trying to have a right that's what we're looking for, a right relationship or a right standing with God. And then we ought to pray to Him in faith, having confidence that He'll answer. But God's the power that God had, and we see in this account here, is not just confined to the past. It applies for today, right? We can come to the Lord, and we can know that we can bring requests and questions to Him, and He'll answer our prayers. And then a lot of times, people pray, and a lot of times, sometimes, maybe you've even done it, maybe I've done it, where you pray, and do you really have confidence that you can do it, or are you just saying, I mean, we just really need to pray, and when we pray, we need to be wholeheartedly praying to the Lord, not just half-heartedly, and we need to be praying, knowing that, and having that total confidence that He can grant that, and again, it would be His will that He'll grant it. And we ought not be unsettled in our faith. We ought to we ought to stand firm and trust and know. Okay, let's look at 1 Kings 17, 22 through 24. And we know here that Elijah, he prayed 3 times. That's a great point. We think about the Trinity and think about him praying. 1 Kings 17, 22 through 24 now.
you want to read?
Oh, I'm sorry, I guess I didn't hear you, I've been too busy trying to find it.
Oh.
It's First Kings.
Yeah, if you'd like to read for us 1 Kings 7, chapter 17, 22 through 24.
22.
Through 24.
And the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child began to come in, and he revived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down out of the chamber into the house, and delivered him unto his mother. And Elijah said, See, thy son liveth. And the woman said to Elijah, Now by this I know that thou art a man of God, and that the word of the Lord is in thy mouth is true.
All right. So we see here in this account, there was despair here, there was great loss, and there was, it did not look well here, but we think about there is hope in the grace of God. There's always hope in the grace of God. Looking to Him, praying to Him, trusting in Him, living for Him. We think about, let's think of some things that may happen in our world today. We think about raising a family. Think about kids. Maybe your kids aren't going the way you desire they would live their lives. It's a fact of life. Maybe a marriage isn't going well. We think of all these things, but we need to not give up, not throw in the towel, but look to the Lord, pray to Him, look to Him. Knowing that He is all-powerful and nothing's impossible with God. Sometimes you might think about maybe you think you're going to get stuck in a job. Maybe someone else keeps getting promoted ahead of you. Who knows? But keep living for the Lord. Keep serving the Lord. We think of the fact that the account we've been going through the study of Joseph. Look at Joseph. He was traded as slavery. He was accused wrongly. He was, up and down, but he continued serving the Lord, and the end was he was used a blessing of God. Don't give up. Don't lose your faith. Don't lose your trust. Stick with it. But again, nothing's impossible with God. You'll never see more of God's grace than when. Are you going to see God's grace when you're on top of the mountain all the time? Or are you going to see God's grace? When are you going to experience God's grace? Well, when you're in trials and tribulations and when you're in difficulties, that's when you're going to see and feel and sense God's grace. He's the one that's going to get you through it. Let's see here. Now, if you were, let's say you were the widowed woman, and if you were in the widowed woman's shoes in the situation in this story, upon Elijah's, what do you think her greatest fear might have been? Just curious. There's no right or wrong answer. Just let's throw some thoughts out here, and then we'll think of something. So she lost her husband, and what do you think might have been her greatest fear?
She would provide for her son.
Yeah, how she provide for her son. And other thoughts? There's no right or wrong answer. I was curious.
Being alone.
Being alone, and if she was going to be alone, it would be because what? Something happened to who? Her son. And you think about, you think about mothers, you think about families, you think about, you think about when children pass before the parents. That can be really hard on parents a lot of times, when you think about that. Because parents, it's kind of one of those things that parents would expect to outlive their children, and it's just the way things are supposed to go in a world, right? But that's not the way they go. We know that's not the case. But we think about this woman, and she was certain that something would happen to her son, and her fear became reality when he passed away, right? But God gave grace, and God answered Elijah's prayer, and she was blessed. We have a thought here. God bestows abundant grace. We don't have to talk God into giving us grace, but because God loves us, God cares about us, God gives us grace freely. if we just ask for it, look to Him for it, and have faith and trust in Him. And through His grace, He'll meet and supply all our needs, the needs that we might have, and He might bless us in ways beyond what we can even imagine, right? But we have to have faith and trust in Him. All right, so in conclusion, the testimony of the widow, the testimony of the widow has been an account in God's Word for centuries. But let's take a look at what did Jesus say in Luke 4:25 through 26. Luke 4:25 through 26.
But I tell you a truth. Many widows were in Israel in the days of Elias, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, when great famine was throughout all the land. But unto none of them was Elias sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow.
All right, we just seen this account. We just went through these verses of scriptures, and we see here that her life can be an example to us in our lives. And we see the importance of faith, the power of grace that can relieve the fears that we might have. Grace takes our burden and replaces them with God's blessings. Grace takes our fears and replaces them with God's peace. Grace provides the means for us to receive what we need from the Lord. And we need to stop relying on our own strength. We need to allow God to let His grace be made perfect in our weakness. We think about it, we're not alone. God will never leave us or forsake us. Let's look at Hebrews 13:5. Let's take a look in closing here at Hebrews 13, verse 5.
Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee.
All right, so that's a promise and a blessing that we can have. And then, of course, we had our song that we thought about earlier. We had Amazing Grace. We had, as we thought here again, that His grace brought me safe thus far. Grace will lead me home. There's no way we're going to get to go through all the questions in 5 minutes. So maybe we should just quit here. So we'll ask Brother Elmer if you'd be so kind as to dismiss us in prayer.
Merciful Father, again, we thank you for allowing us to be here on this beautiful morning. And Lord, help us to all put our minds on what the pastor has for us this morning. Again, Lord, I specifically pray, Lord, that our country is again blessed by you somehow, and that through whatever's going on, Lord, that you're lifted up and there's some sort of revival. Again, Lord, I pray for all the people who aren't here. Please take away whatever's keeping them from attending. Lord, we pray for Sister Jen and her brother. Lord, just bless theirs, only you can. In Christ's name we pray, amen.